veterans. He served as post commander of his American Legion, where he brought stability and growth for the first time in 10 years. Tom then went on to co-found the West Michigan Veterans Ranch that focuses on suicide prevention and financial help for veterans while working with them to find a new purpose in life. An ardent Christian, Tom and his wife, Jamie, strive to raise their 3 children properly in the eyes of the Lord, not in the eyes of Big Brother. Tom knows the line in the sand that it has been drawn. The time of choosing has come, and the choice couldn't be clearer. Tom will not surrender our border, our culture, or our rights as American citizens to immigrants, establishment, politicians, or the global corporation, pandering to them. Welcome, Tom Norton.
June 19th, I'll move that away a little bit. June 19th is actually, as everybody's heard, is marking the end of the American Civil War. The thing that's a little bit different here, we've not heard about that type of history of how we got there. The American Civil War, this nation is the only nation in the history of the world where slaves did not rebel for freedom. In the history of the entire planet, where it went to war with itself to dedicate itself to its full measure, whether or not all men were created equal, endowed with their rights by their Creator. It wasn't just African Americans that were slaves in the United States. We had American Indians that were slaves in the United States, and most people don't realize this. In the Constitution, we talk about indentured servitude out of the American Civil War because we would bring the Irish over from Ireland and put them in indentured servitude. We had multiple forms of slavery. It was not one race, it was multiple races in this nation. And the Republican Party, founded in Michigan, from the Free Soil Party, made sure that all men were created equal and to fight for all 3 races that were set in slavery. As a matter of fact, my great-great-grandfather who fought in the 17th Illinois was from Cairo, Illinois. He fought in the American Civil War and went down to Tennessee, and he married my great-great-grandmother, who was half Indian and half white, and was a slave in Tennessee. They moved to Croton, Michigan. And then my great-great-grandfather would marry his kids to other Germans so that they didn't have tan skin. My father, if you ever see him, that's why he looks like a German Indian. Americans have to realize that's the type of thing that actually occurred in this nation. And throughout the American Civil War, African Americans fought. And they had to fight in war to free themselves. American Indians fought in the West for the Union. Irish fought for them to no longer be indentured servants for freedom. It was every culture and every creed. And as that American Civil War progressed, over 620,000 men and women lost their lives on the battlefield. Not including disease, it was over 700,000. The entire population of Grand Rapids wiped out in one war. Today's population, think about that. Nobody in the room left, not including the wounded. As an Afghanistan war veteran, I often think about the type of things that those soldiers went through. And Abraham Lincoln said it best, and when I was in high school, and I used to do Civil War reenacting actually, 3rd Michigan Infantry, one of the speeches that always struck me, and means more now as a combat vet than it did then, is something that I was thinking about while I'm here. So I apologize because this is the first time I've read it in 15 years. And it meant more to me as I read it this time. 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives, that that nation might live. Most people don't realize this because they weren't taught this in history. All the hatred in America, all the hatred of a combat veteran, Vietnam veterans struggled with Asians. World War II veterans struggled with Japanese. For me, I struggle with radical Islam. But the thing that sits there and makes it so I can have friends that are Muslim and have Middle Eastern is because I think about what happened 50 years later. July 3rd, 1913 was the first Civil War reenactment in the history of this nation. Survivors of Pickett's charge lined up. Union soldiers lined up at the stone wall. They started marching across the battlefield. They went over the fence. And think about this. And as they came up to that wall, they couldn't even fire their muskets. They couldn't fire the blanks. They dropped their rifles. Some men fell to the wall. Others broke down in tears. And they stand across the battlefield, remembering their fallen comrades. That's what Juneteenth should actually recognize to somebody, not this political concept of separation. But no matter how bad we are, how many scars we have from war, that we can come together and hug each other after trying to kill each other 50 years earlier. Think about holidays in that fashion. And that is actually that is what dedicates me to this country, is because I think about those men. Think about the battlefields across the history. Tuskegee Airmen set records in World War II. We used the code breakers in the Pacific, spoke American Indian. This nation has always been a melting pot. Those divisions are always going to be there. But at every point in history, there's been brave men and women who have sat there and scaled the hills of Point Cahawk, who charged up in Chattanooga during the American Civil War because they were tired of their general saying retreat. And in every single time, in every battle, in every warfare, anywhere in this nation, that is what is still inside of us as human beings. And it will never dedicate to the color of skin, but the content of every character, of every single American. And that's what we need to make sure to strive and fight for.